Yeah.
Well, folks. Okay, so hey everyone, my name is Shauna, and welcome to Tending to Your Relationship After Kids, which is hosted by Hive Impact Fund and Birthing the Magic Collaborative. Today, we welcome Emma Basch to navigate desire changes, practical communication tools for exhausted parents like me, and more. But before I pass it over to Emma, I wanted to share a little bit more about her. So, Emma is a licensed clinical psychologist specializing in perinatal and reproductive mental health, and the founder of Dr. Emma Bash and Associates, which is a group which is a group specializing in women's health. She supports clients throughout her journey to parenthood, from infertility to pregnancy, postpartum, and beyond. She's also the vice president of the DC Metro Perinatal Mental Health Collaborative and a board member of the Washington, DC chapter of Postpartum Support International. She's also a proud Washington native and a mom of two. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to you, Emma.
Thank you, Shauna. Hi, everyone. I was explaining to Shauna I am not great at Zoom and I can't see you per the settings. So we'll be monitoring the chat as best we can, but I really like these presentations to be as interactive and collaborative as possible. These slides are made to address sort of the most common things that I think kind of help us understand what happens to relationship after kids, but certainly can't cover everything. So if you have questions, things I didn't mention, things you want me to elaborate on, drop them in the chat and I will do my best to answer them. So without further ado, I will kick it off.
Emma, while you're sneezing, I'm just take this moment. We do have just one question, but maybe you'll speak to it, but just going to put it in here just in case. But interested in information of how a partner can show support during the different phases of a woman's menstrual cycle, or does a partner not get involved? So you may
Ooh,
touch on that, but if you do, just let us know. But that's something top of mind.
not on my plan about this. So will you remind me at the end and we can talk to
Yeah,
that
we'll
as
do.
well.
Yep.
Okay. So just to outline, okay, it's just a quote that I saw. Before kids, we were a couple. Now we're a logistical support system for tiny humans, which feels pretty darn true to me. All right. So, what we're going to talk about today, why your relationship matters after having kids, because it can feel like sometimes it's the last thing on your plate. What changes after kids, and I'm going to spend a little bit more time on like the early part of what changes when kids are really little. Common relationship challenges. We're going to talk a little bit about sex and what changes there, and then strategies to stay connected. I'm going to try to make sure we have a good chunk of time for questions. If I go too fast, just let me know. All right. Okay, so why does this matter, right? Clearly, we're here because this matters to us. But what we know from research, certainly from clinical experience and lived experience, we know this, that the transition to parenthood is a huge shift for couples. Studies consistently show that relationship satisfaction declines after having children, especially in the first year. I just have a few studies cited. So, like as much as 67% of couples are reporting a decrease in relationship satisfaction, at least initially. And I wanted to note, I can't see who's here and who is identified as a mother, but studies suggest that the decline in satisfaction is steeper for people who identify as mothers, and that relationship satisfaction can contribute to maternal depression. And as a perinatal mental health specialist, maternal depression is something I pay attention to a lot, so I wanted to flag that here. We want to address relationship dissatisfaction because the health of the relationship is critical for parents and for the health of the whole family system. So it's really important. I listed a few things that change after we have a child. Time and energy, our identity, communication, sex, division of labor, sleep, hormones, physical change, parenting differences, right? Lots of different things can change. And we'll go into them in a little more detail. And Okay, so I wanted to talk about changes in energy and time. It seems fairly obvious, but worth stating that sleep deprivation impacts us emotionally, like intensely. We're not just tired, we are not as good at processing emotion. Okay, so studies show that fatigue impacts our emotional interpretation of events, right? So how we receive what our partner might say to us is impacted by sleep. So we are more irritable, we are more likely to engage in conflict, we can be more reactive, and of course, we have less energy and patience for each other and less time for any kind of intimate connection. Identity shifts, and there's a typo, I will fix that. Changes in identity and role can impact how couples see themselves and their relationships, right? The process of becoming a parent is a developmental shift in identity That does not always line up between partners, both in terms of when the shift happens, how the shift happens, and if it happens in alignment or out of alignment. Hormones and physical changes. So, postpartum shifts in hormones can impact sex drive for both men and women. So, typically, when you think of postpartum hormones, we are thinking of the person who has given birth. In fact, this is not the case. We can see hormonal shifts in partners. This is male partners and female partners, likely has to do with the acts of caregiving, changes in sleep, all of that can affect our hormones. So that can be a huge change in the dynamic in a couple. Discomfort with bodily changes can create issues with intimacy and connection with our partner. And this feeling, this term people may have heard of being touched out. So just feeling like you are caregiving, you are holding babies, you are holding kids, you are sort of physically your body is not your own in ways that can make it hard to feel close to your partner. Division of labor is one we're going to talk a lot about. A huge predictor in relationship dissatisfaction is when there's a mismatch between expected and actual division of childcare and household labor. So related. So this is a huge connection. If there is a disconnect there, relationship dissatisfaction increases. Um, and there's a huge question of emotional labor, which really changes after we have kids. So, what is the unseen work that we are doing as caregivers, as moms, as dads, as partners that is not seen by our partner? And if it is not seen, do we feel resentful? Communication. So, couples often shift to task focused talk. So, task focused talk is logistics, task sharing, planning. So this is away from emotional dialogue. And there's often declines in positive engagement and increase in negative interactions, especially early postpartum. And that's usually for all the reasons I mentioned before. Parenting differences. This is one that sort of evolves, right? So this is not just early postpartum. This can continue because parenting is a lifelong journey. So couples who rarely argue can find themselves surprised by how much they are fighting over different approaches to parenting tasks and rules and roles. Parenting conflicts can unmask some differences in values and expectations around parenthood, right? You may have had a lot of conversations before deciding to have a child or maybe getting married or to have a long-term partnership about what matters to you, what a family looks like. That does not mean that you've encountered everything about what you value as a parent or that you know until you become a parent. So this can really surprise people. Last one, and then I'm going to pause. Sex really changes after having babies. So, very common for couples to experience a decrease in both sexual desire and sexual activity. So, desire to have sex and the amount of time people have sex. And the way I like to explain this to clients, I'm borrowing Emily Nagoski, who's really recommend all her books. She is a researcher, a sex therapist. She has a model that she calls the brakes and accelerator model as a way to understand changes in intimacy, barriers that interfere with sexual connection. This is a model that she uses generally, but I think it's a perfect model to understand what happens when we have kids. So, brakes is the sexual inhibition system, so the things that make sex and desire for sex shut down, versus accelerator, which is the sexual excitation system. So, to share a little bit more about what that means, things that can go on your brakes, your hormone change, your fatigue, your stress, conflict, time, energy, overstimulation. I bet we could create an even longer list. This is just the stuff that initially came up, but there's so many things that hit the brakes. The accelerator, things that make you want to be intimate with your partner, is obviously going to depend on each person and can be very, very different for each member of a couple. The kicker is if you imagine you're driving your car, if something is on the brakes, right? Your foot's on the brakes, there's, I don't know, something heavy on your brakes, you can push that accelerator as much as you want. Your car is not going to move if something is on the brakes, or it's not, right? Like it's going to lurch, it's going to make a noise, but nothing's going to happen. So these issues, whatever is leaning on the brakes, are where the issues in sexual desire really need to get addressed. So I'm going to pause here, right? These are the common challenges. We're going to get into ways to possible solutions, things to think about, ways to improve. But I want to start with challenges and see Do we have questions about what I've said? What have I not addressed that comes up for you? And Shauna, I will rely on you.
Yes, aside from that first one, there was a follow-up that said, my husband and partner and father of our child mentions that I'm different from before and after. I'm curious if the reproductive system and changing identity in becoming a mom is influencing my brain and view interactions with him. I'm not sure if you want to say that's related to the first one or if that one you want to talk about here. What
Relate
else?
to everything. So, when we become a parent, so you meaning like how do we understand this? Yeah, I think that like let's talk about that just more broadly, and then I can answer the menstrual cycle question here if helpful or towards the end. So there's a whole theory of matrescence, which is the developmental task of becoming a mother. If you like think about the end of that word, it sounds like a parallel to adolescence, right? And similar to adolescence, in adolescence, we kind of understand, okay, as someone becomes an adult, it is a developmental shift that involves hormone change, body change, identity change, relationship change. It happens over a period of time as someone kind of figures out, okay, who am I now as an adult in the world? Matrescence is the parallel for parenting. What's changing in my, as a mom, what's changing in my body, what's changing in my hormones, what's changing in my brain. And there are all kinds of studies about shifts that happen in the brain because of hormonal changes and caregiving changes. What's changing in my identity, what's changing in my relationship as I go through this developmental stage of becoming a parent. Key difference or differences. One, we give adolescents so much space, right? We kind of know like teens are hard. We don't give new parents or parents sort of like at all space to understand that these changes are happening and that they're normal. We need some space to process. Also, they're happening while caregiving. So, like, all of these changes are happening while you have to keep a bunch of tiny humans alive. So, I'm a psychologist. I'm not your psychologist to the questioner, so I can't speak specifically to your relationship. But yes, it's very possible that there are changes in who you are, how your brain is functioning, what you value, what your energy is like. That's really, really normal after having children. And I think what I remind clients is some things change back, right? Like when there's equilibrium, and some changes are permanent. That's how it is with any developmental shift. We go through shifting and then things have to settle. And in that settle, we will see some things that are the same and some things that are different. Hopefully, I answered that.
Yes, and no further questions.
Okay. I'm going to save the menstrual question till later then, since
Oh,
we'll be more
yep.
about solutions then. Okay. And feel free to interrupt me as we go. Okay, this is from the Gottman Institute. The Gottmans are couples therapists and researchers, and a couple themselves, who have a whole curriculum around, they're bringing home baby, which is a great curriculum around postpartum and new parenting relationship challenges, which is very cool for people to seek even before they have a baby. They're bringing home baby educated therapists who use their curriculum. But I just really like this quote. While children certainly challenge relationships, they can also strengthen them in profound ways. Couples who navigate parenthood successfully often report feeling more connected to their partner than ever before. So I bring this quote up because I started this with what sounds like some pretty bleak statistics about relationship dissatisfaction, and I don't want to present a bleak picture, but because there are ways to improve your relationship and stay connected and feel satisfied, but also many people find that parenting with the person they've chosen to be their partner is deeply fulfilling and can really strengthen their relationship, seeing their partner engage in different ways, and doing this most meaningful work of caregiving. All right. This is my number one tip, and it sounds very simple, but I think it's really important, is like, let's normalize the transition. We as people do not do well, we as humans, when there's a difference between expectation and reality. So if we go into having children thinking it's rosy, it's going to be great, I love my partner, there's going to be no problems, we are set up for bumps, right? Instead, if we can kind of frame that these relationship changes, they're typical, they're expected, they are not personal, right? Obviously every couple is going to have issues that are personal to them, but the idea of relationship shifting is not personal. It's not a failure, right? If there's challenges, this is an expected developmental shift. So this just sets a realistic framework and helps to reset expectations for your relationship. So I almost consider this like a bit of a mantra. And in fact, that's one of the tips that I sort of suggest to people is have a way of reminding yourself and have your partner the same of normalizing this transition, right? This is a season of my relationship. This will change. This is a moment, right? This is expected. to just help you remember that this is transient in a phase of a relationship. And a phase does not have to mean anything more than that. So, prioritizing communication. So, what I mean by this in this context is emotional and deep and intimate and adult to adult communication, not caregiver task work communication, right? We are probably, given all the logistics of parenting, doing a lot of prioritizing communication around logistics. This is about communicating in the way you did before you had kids. How do you talk to each other regularly and openly about things that matter to you, things that happen in your day, things about who you are as an adult, not just in your role as parent, in your other roles as adult, as a person with a job, as whatever, as friend, as partner, right? When we do this, we can be more open about our needs, and this reduces the likelihood of resentment or unspoken hurt. So, really prioritizing communication that is about that meaningful connection. I suggest couples find ways to create daily rituals of checking in. There's so many ways to do that. When I say no phones, I mean like if you've got a moment at night and this is your 5 minutes, 10 minutes, get your phone out of the room, put it on Do Not Disturb. It's just so easy for there to be interruptions. And in these moments where we're trying to create some intimacy, if there's an interruption, it can really feel hurtful. So, finding just like a moment that is precious that you do regularly, you create a ritual around this. I have some couples who are just really busy. They both work, their kids stay up late. Helped them create rituals of daytime check-ins. Okay, so the phone is involved in those situations because they're both at work, right? At 1 o'clock, if there's no meeting on the calendar, we have this 10-minute check-in. How is your day going? Tell me what's going well, what's hard for you, right? There's all kinds of ways to get creative. Um, Keep your relationship kid-free, or keep your conversation kid-free. So if it's during that check-in, we're not talking about the children. You can share. I suggest they highlight and low light from the day. The reason I suggest this, it is just a way to start to build in some reflection and curiosity with your partner if you're sharing what's going well and what's hard, right? So it's a way to remember, how do we have these deeper conversations? Okay, a little bit more about strengthening communication. When we are tired, again, to that emotional reactivity I referenced earlier, where we can misinterpret things or we can communicate harshly, we really need to work on engaging in healthy and respectful communication. We all need a reminder of this, right? And I think particularly when we've had a partner for a while, we can sort of take for granted how we speak to each other. But it really matters how we talk to each other. So, ways to practice. Honestly, the first thing I tell people is practicing repair. So the practice starts with what happens when things go wrong, right? Because things will go wrong. Back to normalizing this transition. So learning how do we repair after conflict really helps break up cycles of resentment or hurt in a relationship. How do we apologize? How do we come back together? How do we move towards rather than away from our partner when we've been harsh or we've said something unkind? So that is a regular practice of repair after rupture. Active listening, which means really attending, using your nonverbals to make it clear that you're listening. Again, put that phone down, right? Otherwise, it's really when someone is primed to feel like you're not listening, or if there's tension in the relationship, that's going to feel really hurtful. Direct requests, saying what we need from our partner, asking for something rather than we all wish, it's very human, that our partner will be able to anticipate anything that we need. No one's magic, right? And it'll go much, much better if you are able to say directly what you need. Finding new ways to communicate and connect if the old ones aren't working. And by that, I mean figuring out what time of day, where, when, how. Does it work better for your family to have a short check-in every day? Or does it work better to find a reliable babysitter or family member that allows you and your partner to have a date night every 2 weeks, right? You'll have to see what works for your time, energy, and family system. Shauna, any questions before I keep going?
We have conversation. Someone has a question. I'm not sure if they're going to come off mute, but they haven't dropped it in the chat. Cece, do you want to ask? Are you able to come off mute or do you want to drop it in the chat and I can ask for you? Oh, they can't come off audio. Okay, if you want to if anybody who has questions, feel free to drop it in the chat and I can ask for you.
Yes.
Let me just give a moment. Oh, I did in the Q&A. Oh, Q&A. Where? One second. Oh, here it is. Okay. People have been having kids since the beginning of time. As a new parent, my question is what makes some men stay and some leave? What hormonal changes do men experience? And what countries in the world have successful relationships after kids? I'm asking to know what makes them successful because I'm struggling. My body doesn't feel the same and I'm afraid to have sex.
Okay, there's a lot of questions in there, and I want to try to like take all of them. So, Shauna, can we start with the beginning?
Yes, the first one is as a new parent, my question is what makes some men stay and some leave?
That is a question that's going to be extremely specific to each man. There is no one thing that makes some men stay and some men leave. So, um, I think like I'm going to have trouble answering that way in any way that's going to be honest or helpful because there's no rhyme or reason. But to put it into buckets, individual differences and beliefs around what it means to be in a relationship or be a father or be a parent, familial differences, right? What was that person raised with or not raised with? What is sort of normalized for them? Emotional and trauma reasons, right? What are their own experience of being parented or fathered or not fathered? Um, Relationship dissatisfaction, right? Are we happy in the relationship or not? Addiction, right? Are there substance or mental health issues? I mean, there's a million reasons why people stay or why people don't stay, but there's no one thing we can point to here.
Okay.
The
The
next
next
piece.
question, yep, was what hormonal changes do men experience?
So we can see for some men there's a decrease in testosterone after when they are new parents. So sort of like parallel to the hormonal changes that can happen in women, some men have a decrease in testosterone. Various theories about that. Is that happening in response to the shifts in their female partner, or is that happening just in the act of caregiving? Does that do something about testosterone?
Okay. And the follow-up to that was what countries in the world have successful relationships after kids?
I don't think there's any way to answer that question because it's not as though there is a particular country or ethnicity or religious background or this or that could sort of like define successful relationships. So, any data that we would have on that would be muddy data because what is a successful relationship? Well, it depends on your expectation and your model. That's on the micro, on the macro, what's happening in that country, what's normal in that culture, right? There's just no way to answer that.
Perfect. I think those are all the questions for now.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Anything else in the chat there?
Not right now.
Okay, then I will keep on keeping on and we'll get
All
back to
right.
it. Okay, make the mental load visible. Okay, so clarify roles and responsibilities early. Who's doing what? And revisit them often so expectations are shared and resentment doesn't take hold. And I will add to this because responsibilities change. Um, while we are doing this, partners should acknowledge and offer appreciation to one another regularly, right? I think when we are tired and we are resentful and we are in conflict, it is hard to acknowledge what our spouse or partner is doing or not doing. And that acknowledgement is really important and it goes in both directions. The research on the mental lobe, sorry, my video has frozen, but I can hear everyone, does tend to break down a bit around gender lines, particularly in heterosexual relationships, that women tend to take on more of the care work that's invisible or unseen or certainly not compensated. And so it can be really, really important to make sure that everything is visible so that your partner is aware of all you're doing and vice versa. Um, so checking in regularly about who's doing what and why. And the reason I say why is that sometimes we default to things because of our own internalized beliefs. Maybe we grew up with the belief that men do this and women do that. Maybe we grew up with the belief that I'm bad at this, right? It's really important that this is an actual conversation and not an expectation between partners about who's doing what. Making sure again that that unseen gets seen. There are all kinds of different ways to do this. I like sort of aligned with that Eve Rodsky's fair play model. This idea is a way to split up domestic tasks, care work, where the person who is responsible for a task is responsible for the CPE, the conception, planning, and execution. So I'm going to give you just a little example. Let's say I'm going to use a heterosexual couple here. Let's say you've said, okay, I'm really busy breastfeeding. Husband, you are in charge of groceries. What that means, conception, that means he's responsible for what groceries do we need, right? Not asking you, are we out of milk? No, he's responsible for what do we need? When, like when am I going to get it? Where am I going to get it from? And getting it, right? So that whole thing lives under the purview of that person who has taken on that task. And the reason that is so critical is because that asking, do we need milk? What's the best store to go to? Right? That's emotional work. And so the whole idea behind this fair play model is to reduce that emotional labor and even out the unseen parts of a mental load. Any questions popping up there?
Not at this time, no.
Okay, cool. Redefining intimacy. Okay, so let's remember intimacy can mean a lot more than sex. And when I say sex, I like literally mean more than sexual intercourse, right? Anything can be intimate. We need to find new ways to feel close to your partner and to honor those changes. It is totally normal to have a decrease in sex drive for all the reasons that we talked about, all of those things that are happening on your breaks. That does not mean you cannot have intimacy with your partner, even if you have no desire in sex or anything that feels like sexual activity. And it's really important that partners respect that in one another. So it's discussing like what your preferences are. What are you comfortable with? What are you not comfortable with? What non-sexualized forms of physical contact feel good for you? This can be really important because sometimes when there's a lot on the breaks and partners and do not want to have sex, if we're not feeling ready for that, there can be a total rupture in any kind of physical intimacy, and then people can feel distant. But making an effort, is it sitting next to your partner on the, when you're watching TV? Is it holding hands? Is it hugs, right? Are there other ways that can help you feel physically connected? Be really aware of what's on your breaks, okay? Share that with your partner. It could be that they can help you take some of that stuff off your breaks, right? Maybe there's things on there that it would make a much bigger deal if they took some of that stuff off your breaks, if that would help you feel more connected. And then certainly taking the pressure off what intimacy is supposed to look like. There's no one way it goes. There's all kinds of research on sexual satisfaction. People ask all the time, what's the right amount of times a week or month to have sex with my partner? What's normal, what's not normal. The reality is it's just so different, right? So what we know in terms of people who are sexually satisfied, frankly, is like they like the type of intimacy they're having and the frequency that they're having it, right? That's the answer. It's not that there's a magic number. It's not that there's something normal. It's just that people who like it just like it, right? It works for them and they're not questioning it, and that those are the people who are satisfied. Make sense?
Do you have any suggestions for someone who is struggling in that area or is afraid to have sex in some way?
Yes, absolutely. So let's remember that sex is complicated. Sex is physical, sex is hormonal, sex is emotional, sex is relational. So you have to figure out for yourself what part is feeling hard, right? Is it physical, right? Is something painful? If something is painful, let's remember we've got physical therapy, we've got urogynecology, we've got all kinds of people that can help. We've got hormonal treatments, right? Is it physical in that way? Is it emotional? Does it feel for some new parents? The identity, like holding the identity of mother or father and sexual adult is really hard. Is that something that you're struggling with, right? Like, is it that? Do you feel pressure from your partner? Do you feel pressure from socially? I think one thing I bump into all the time in my therapy practice is someone comes to me and they say, okay, it's been 6 weeks. My doctor said I'm cleared for sex. Okay, that just means there's not like a medically dangerous thing happening. Doesn't mean you're ready. So taking the pressure off when you have sex, like how often it should be, how soon after having a baby, and then figuring out what's on those breaks is going to be really helpful. Also, really recognizing that differences in desire are really normal, right? And they can shift across a relationship, but like paying attention to what's going on with that. And then I think within that, we can normalize that while also seeking support around that. So, meaning like if you are finding that you have low desire, can address the physical, you can address the psychological, you can address the medical, you can address relational. It doesn't mean there's a problem with your desire, but it means there may be some things that are helpful.
Great, thank you. No further questions.
Okay. Prioritizing time together, this one's so hard. It's really simple, but it's so hard because we all have a gazillion other things that demand our attention, and usually they demand our attention in urgent ways when we're talking about kids. I don't mean emergency, I just mean like, Mom, I need my water filled up. I forgot my book. Oh, whoops, I have this project due tomorrow, right? There's so many things that grab your attention. But maintaining a strong couples who maintain a strong connection, they do prioritize their relationship, and unsurprisingly, they have more satisfaction. Okay, this does not mean I got to go on a fancy date with my partner once a week. Maybe some people that's what happens, but for most people, that's unattainable for all the reasons. So, being really intentional about what it means to prioritize time, but being super flexible and creative around what that looks like, right? Like, do you find, I don't know, maybe someone has the miracle kids who sleep in. I don't have them, but those kids, right? Maybe you and your partner can have coffee in the morning together, and that is a time where like you're just together. Maybe it's time at night after the kids go to bed. Maybe it's checking in during the day. Maybe it's a date that is happening during the day. Maybe, you both, if finances work for it, take a day or a half day off work. And that's what happens. Maybe you have to do a lot of planning to get caregiving. Like there's all kinds of way. Or maybe prioritizing time is just a 5 minute check-in where it's very clear to your partner they have your attention and you have theirs. Practicing gratitude. Okay, I think a lot of people hear gratitude practices and it sounds like very like sunshine and roses, and it can, but that's really not what I mean. What I mean here is when we are intentional with our partner, it's so easy to focus on what's not working. And right, when we are angry, it affects the information we are receiving. So we are taking in literally everything that's going wrong. We're noticing every mistake our partner made, every weird noise they made, every time they didn't put their shoes away, whatever it is. So when we're stressed out or we're frustrated, all we're noticing is what is not working. So taking the time to acknowledge your partner's efforts, to say thank you, to like these little practices, can really be meaningful. These small, regular expressions of gratitude, even if it's like normal stuff that they're doing for your family. Obviously, when I'm giving these suggestions, I mean them in both directions. Like this has to be happening in both ways, but notice and thank each other. Um, no, catch someone doing something right, not just some doing something wrong. Reminder of being on the same team, right? Like couples can start to feel at odds, but when we practice that gratitude or even say during conflict, hey, whoa, stop, right? We are both on the same team. We are both want the same thing here, can really disrupt conflict cycles and just reduce the tension in the household. Okay, how do we know if we need more help? Meaning like, okay, we're trying these things, but we're still really having a hard time. Do we need couples therapy? Do we need individual therapy? I'm going to start at the bottom. There doesn't need to be a problem to get help. You can always get help. You can consult with a mental health professional, a doctor, a friend, a clergy person, whoever is your person that would help you. You can always do that. Generally speaking, I do think if there is conflict without improvement, if there's just like these really painful cycles, they're not getting better, it's a good time to seek couples therapy. If someone is having mental health or substance abuse problems, obviously it's a really good time to get support. I put in here Gottman, who I referenced earlier. These are the couples therapy researchers about things. He calls them the four horsemen, meaning like the four signs of doom. Something is going on in a relationship. Criticism, contempt, resentment, and stonewalling. When the Gottmans reference this, they don't mean like one time. They mean if in the relationship there's a strong pattern of criticism, contempt, resentment, and stonewalling. These are problem areas that really could use some usually additional help to break those patterns. So these would be reasons I would say seek some couples therapy. When we go to the key takeaways, and I want to leave a lot of time for questions, and I promise I will get back to that unless there's any questions now, Shauna.
Not right now, no.
So remembering like normalizing relationship strain is really typical to have strain after you have kids. The question to ask is not whether having kids will impact your relationship. It will. It's in what way, meaning it doesn't have to be negative. Couples who are intentional about intending to their relationship after having kids report deeper connection. Okay, so that intentionality and effort is really important. Reminder that tending to your relationship is not just important for you or for your coupledom, it's important for the health of your family system. And I'm just going to add to this a little note on couples who split up, I know this is a talk for folks who are tending to their relationship with the implication that they're in an active relationship. This is true if you're not. This is true for non-partnered people who had a kid together. This is true for divorced couple, right? That relationship doesn't mean romantic anymore, is important to be tended to for the health of your whole family system. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. And I realize I can't see people, but then I can tend more to questions. And I can start with that menstrual question,
Yep.
and then we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, let me put it. Okay. So, information or perspective of how a partner can show support during the different phases of a woman's menstrual cycle, or
Okay.
does a partner not get involved?
That's going to be up to a specific relationship and like, what that feels like. So here is what I would say, speaking in generalities. I think that if we partition something like a menstrual cycle off and we're talking about a relationship, I'm guessing this is a heterosexual relationship. It doesn't have to be. If, let's say, a woman is having hormonal challenges in her menstrual cycle or mood challenges, it is not a good idea to get involved in the sense that, like, you're calling someone hormonal or you're tracking for them, but to get involved in the sense that that is a part of what's happening in your family system and to be supportive, sure. So, I'm not entirely sure what it would mean to get involved, but, if your partner is having pain, help, right? If your partner notices, hey, I really need more sleep during my luteal phase, help them get more sleep. Um, that said, always be respectful of your partner. If that does not feel good for your partner, take their lead. But generally, back to this idea of direct communication, ask.
Fair. Great. Okay, we have a lot coming in. So,
Woof. Okay. Okay.
uh, so I think you shared a lot about strategies. How
Yeah.
do you do that when the way that they deal with conflict is by stonewalling?
Awesome. Okay. So this is where I would say it might be helpful to get some outside help because those patterns of stonewalling, usually when we learn conflict patterns, they are conflict patterns that are learned from childhood. It might be what we witnessed in our family, it might be what we experienced. And so when we are under conflict or stress, our anxious parts, right, our attachment, all of the relationships models that we grew up with come into our romantic relationships. It's really hard to stop that without someone that can help you get up and under. Why are we stonewalling? Right? I'm sure it's not a conscious thing, right? When we go to these defensive patterns, we're not saying, aha, this is the way I'm going to solve this conflict. It's like the default network our brain goes to because that's how we've been taught to manage and feel safe in conflict. So usually we need somebody else to help us get out of that. Couples therapist, if you're not a therapy person, again, whoever could be a helpful person within your sphere. I bring back up the Bringing Home Baby curriculum, which is part of Gottman's education, can be really, really helpful. What I would say, like in a moment like that, where you're doing this with each other, where you're stonewalling, people need to find a way to safely disconnect in order to reconnect. So maybe there's a thing you can say to each other that is just an acknowledgement of what's happening and a reminder we love each other. We need space, right? You need to sort of safely and disconnect in order to reconnect.
Perfect. And on the topic of getting help, the follow-up question to that is, do you have any suggestions for convincing a husband or a spouse, especially when they're introverts, to do couples therapy or counseling?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. I feel like the belief around couples therapy is like we go if there's something wrong. And I really like to frame it like why wouldn't we all want to improve our relationships? Why wouldn't we all want some extra support? So I do think the frame of it as this isn't an indication of a problem. This is a way to fix it together. I think, reminding that person that like it is the job of the couples therapist to navigate that, right? Like when people come to me for couples therapy, that's my job. If I have an introverted partner, if I have a partner that doesn't want to be there. So for that spouse, that's not your job to have to do that, right? Like that's where the couples therapist comes in and can do that work together. I will say, just experientially being a therapist for a long time now, um, that like it's very common for couples to come to couples therapy with one person kicking and screaming. And that's not unusual. It does, like, we're used to that as couples therapists. It doesn't scare us. My last little suggestion that I've said when I've had individual couples or individuals that I'm working with, and I really think couples is important, to just have that person ask their spouse, hey, can we do this one time? Would you be willing, because it matters to me and because I care about us, to try this one time, right? We're just asking for a foot in the door. Last thing I'll say to that, there is a real trend of people coming to individual therapy and they're doing couples therapy without their partner. Okay, what do I mean by that? Someone is coming in and the problem exists within the couple, but it's just one person coming in. It's not ideal. It often starts that way. So, to this particular person, you can start on your own, and it's not going to fix the pieces that are your partners, but it's going to help you navigate this without having to do it alone.
Wonderful. This next one is anonymous, not necessarily a question, but maybe something you'll be able to help speak to. So this person believes that oh, where did it go? Oh, developed PMDD after childbirth and breastfeeding for 2 years. And
Mhm.
so therefore that changed psychologically and oh, therefore I am changed psychologically and perplexed with the idea, and he is perplexed with the idea that she has changed as well. After the child has been born. The PMDD didn't present until after breastfeeding hormones left and the menstrual cycle returned, but it's affected now and he has to cope as well.
Yeah, I mean, you both have to cope with that. Okay, so any time of hormonal transition across our lifespan can change a lot of things about us. So, certainly having babies and breastfeeding, many women can notice changes in things like how they experience their relationships to their hormones, right? What is the internal experience like? And so something like PMDD, which there's lots of ways to think about it, but one way to think about it is an increased emotional sensitivity to the hormonal shifts of the menstrual cycle. So it's entirely possible that the shift in hormones has changed the way that your body is experiencing your cycles. That's no one's fault, right? These things do happen. And so you both have to deal with it and not deal with it in as in like, oh, this is something to put up with. But this is a real PMDD is a medical and psychological, it's a multifaceted condition that you can treat. It's not perfect, but we see a lot of clients in our practice with PMDD, and it's a combination of therapy, medicine, cycle tracking, all kinds of things that can help. So getting that properly assessed and treated for you, not just for your partner, but for you, is totally a good step.
Wonderful. Okay. Any advice for couples that are divorced in tending to the relationship? Does tending to the relationship just center around family therapy or cooperating in kid activities?
It could, but I think, when it's cooperating in kid activities, super, super important. I don't want to belittle that at all, but a respectful relationship, right, that also looks like healthy communication, good boundaries, support, all of that is really good and vital for your emotional well-being, but also for your kids, right? So when divorced couples like do well, there's a lot of respect there. So it's not just, okay, we're gonna like suck it up and show up for our kid, but it's we're gonna show each other respect as much as we can and support and connection in a deeper way. So it's not necessarily couples therapy, but certainly we will have divorced couples come in and say, how can we work on our relationship? How can we integrate my new husband or whoever so that there is a healthy model for all of our benefit, including our children?
Perfect. Okay, a couple more. What is considered postpartum, and how much before having your first child can you safely have another one?
Okay, so two different questions. The second one, that is a real medical question. So, as a psychologist, I mean, I could parrot what my OBGYN colleagues say, but I don't want to speak to that because that is really a medical question and has a lot to do with what happened in your delivery, what is general advice, do you have a menstrual cycle coming back? So I'm going to put that question down. Ah, perfect. We've got a doctor chiming in, 18 months in between deliveries. Great. Cool. So that's the recommendation. Thank you for that because I don't want to speak out of scope. What is considered postpartum? Okay. Generally speaking, what is considered postpartum is within 1 year of giving birth. I personally believe, and many people who are perinatal and reproductive psychologists, for our folks who are still breastfeeding, We kind of extend that because some of the hormonal component of the postpartum experience isn't done, right? So maybe some of the other components of the postpartum experience have wrapped up, but if you are still lactating, you still got a bunch of hormones going in your body that are not your baseline. So I extend that window a lot when I am working with folks who are still breastfeeding.
That makes sense. Okay, another one. So, do you have any comments and perspective on discernment therapy approach?
Oh, yes, discernment therapy. So, for folks who are unfamiliar, discernment is like how we make decisions about what we're going to do in our relationship. Often, discernment therapy refers to like, should we end our relationship or not? Um, I think it can be really helpful. I think it really depends if both folks are going in with that as the goal, meaning sometimes someone is seeking discernment therapy as a way to help them break up with their partner. And so that's different, right? Versus discernment therapy is like, let me actually kind of work and think through together or apart what we want to do. So it's just important if that's what you're seeking, that that's really what you mean.
Wonderful. Okay, now we're at the 10-minute mark. I don't see any additional questions in the chat or Q&A.
Minute, just in case. Oh, I see it. I see lots of chatting.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's a lot of chatting.
Great.
Yeah, it was good. It's a good what is the best way for folks to follow up with you or reach out, like connect with you if they have interest or
Yeah, absolutely. And I really welcome if you have follow-up questions to reach out to me, but also in general. So you can find my practice, which is Dr. Emma Basch and Associates, very easily online. I'm on Instagram with my name as well, Dr. Emma Basch. My practice is based in Washington, D.C., but we are licensed for therapy, and I think it's like 43 states at the moment. So depending on where you are in the country, we can probably help. So you're welcome to reach out through my website. You can certainly reach out to me on Instagram. You know, I always give the disclaimer again, like I said earlier, I'm a psychologist, but unless I am your psychologist, when I'm going to answer these questions, I'm going to have to answer them in generalities. But one thing, sorry about the freezing, that I really like about how my practice works is that in addition to offering individual and couples therapy, we do what we call checkups. And by checkups, I just mean like, I'm not ready to go to therapy yet, but I want to work on this discrete issue. Or I have these few questions and I want to meet with someone who is specialized in this postpartum issue or this couples issue, and I want to take an hour of their time and talk it through. We do that. So we really welcome any and all inquiries around this period of time and would be really glad to help.
that's wonderful. Perfect. And I'm going to wrap up here, but we'll also post a recording of it and share with you if you want to share it out. And for everyone who attended today, thank you so much for the thoughtful conversation and the questions. And Emma, thank you so much for taking the time today. And I think that's everything. Yeah.
So thank you so much for letting me speak on this. It's always really fun. I appreciate all the questions as well. And thanks everyone for your time. Have a good rest of your week.
Yeah. Thank you too. All
All
right.
right. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.